From the Query Portal, you can create a free text query. Select any of the free text queryable fields, like Chief Complaint for example, and start typing in the values for which you want to filter. You can learn more about the syntax for a free text query in the Help option. The syntax options include carets for wildcards, commas to separate multiple entries, the operators AND, OR, and NOT, and parentheses to define order or groupings. There are also special phrases to look for specific terms, and these include the phrase is blank to look for blank entries, is null to look for null entries, and comma inside hard brackets to search for commas. These three special phrases will need to be in all capital letters in order for them to be matched. There is an example complex query here that shows you the syntax for cough or fever in parentheses and not cold, and also in parentheses, and flu as a phrase. If you want to see how that works, you can copy and paste that phrase into your window and then select it. Once you have selected it, you will see it over here on the right side. From here, you can create a time series or data details containing only records that match that free text query criteria. In addition to basic free text queries, the system also supports Microsoft SQL Server regular expressions. This means that if you want to search for a phrase that can contain one of many possible characters, you can wrap those possible choices in square brackets. This will let the system know that you will accept any of the characters inside that bracket as valid. You can also use A-Z or 0-9 to search for any single character between A and Z, or any number between 0 and 9. If you use an underscore, this tells the system to look for any single character, including spaces, punctuation, numbers, or letters. If you need to look for an underscore in your query, wrap that underscore in square brackets. These are more advanced options that you may not need, but they are available if needed. Additionally, you will want to understand how wildcards and spaces interact in free text queries. If you perform a search with wildcards right next to your search phrase, the system will find any record that has that search phrase, no matter if it's in the middle of other words or at the beginning or end of a record. If you want your search phrase to be a unique word, you can use wildcard space phrase space wildcard. This wrapping of the phrase in spaces tells the system to search for your phrase, but only if there are spaces on both sides. The issue with this technique is that records will not start or end with spaces. So if your phrase is at the beginning or end of a record, it will not match this free text query. So to fix this, you can use wildcard space phrase with no wildcard at the end to search for records that end with this search term. This is because there is no trailing wildcard, so the record has to end exactly as searched. You can also search for records that begin with a search term by using phrase space wildcard without the initial wildcard in the search string. If you search for a term with no wildcards, you will only find records that only contain just that term. By using all four techniques and logically joining them with an OR operator, you can search for a phrase in all situations. You also have the ability to apply the free text search string to multiple parameters in the data source. If you choose to apply the search string to other parameters, the selected query field panel will show this by adding the phrase also apply to inside the filter box. When choosing to apply a free text query to other fields, this performs a logical OR between the fields chosen and the original field. Using an example query that looks for the phrase fever in the chief complaint and also applies that search string to the discharge diagnosis means that that query will find any record that has fever in the chief complaint field or the discharge diagnosis. If you were to just place a fever free text query in both fields separately, they would be joined with an AND operator, like normal query operations. This would only return records that had fever in both the chief complaint and the discharge diagnosis. This means that the also applies capability is a nice way to perform an OR function across fields without having to use the advanced query tool. If you are building a complex free text query, you can also use the Query Builder button to help. If you have had text already in your query text box, the Query Builder will automatically translate it into the graphical representation. If you do not, the Query Builder will start with a blank query. You can use this tool to add rules or expressions and groups of rules. For each rule, you can choose 4 separate options: contains, equals, begins with, and ends with. Contains wraps the phrase in wildcards. Equals uses no wildcards. Begins with only puts wildcards at the end of the phrase. Ends with only puts wildcards at the beginning of the phrase. For every group, which you can think of as a parentheses block, you can set the operator to use between expressions. You can use the Help button to bring up additional information and examples. When finished, you can click on the Submit button, and the resultant query will be placed in the normal query wizard field for your parameter. You can then select it to add it as a filter for your query. Whether you hand type in your free text query or use the Query Builder, once it's been completed, you can use any of the action buttons at the bottom of the query wizard to utilize your new free text query throughout the system.